Tonight we look at how members of Congress are reaching across the aisle to find common ground, to try to work together to address big issues. Joining us this evening, California Democratic Congressman Scott Peters and Michigan Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga. Congressman, thanks for being here. I want to play this soundbite from President Biden. Take a listen.
My friends talk about the big spend of Biden. Well, guess what? I made a promise. I'll never raise federal tax on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. I kept my promise. And unlike the last president, in my first 2 years in office, even with all we've done, I'm the first one to cut the federal debt by $1.7 trillion.
Well, not really. He didn't cut the federal debt. The debt actually went up in the Biden administration, $3.5 trillion. It's at over $31 trillion now. You all are working across the aisle on financial matters. Tell me how Congress gets their head around this from both sides of the aisle.
Frankly, starting the conversation or maybe restarting the conversation has been a big challenge. Obviously, we have been spending a lot of money over the last number of years going into COVID, coming out of COVID. But we've got to find some common ground here. And I've got some constituents, to be honest, that don't think we ought to be having that conversation. I get told on occasion, you shouldn't even be talking to these people, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say to them, look, if we're not having the conversation, how are we supposed to figure out whether we agree on 5%, 15%, or 50%? And there are some things that we know that are looming here. For example, 2033. There's going to be a cut to Social Security. It is a conversation we have to have.
Congressman Peters, what about that? We're facing another fiscal cliff come September. How can you guys work together to avoid that?
Well, I think we have to. I mean, think about Bill and I realize that this has been an issue that's been developed over time. It's not just a Democratic or Republican issue. Both parties have been voting for funding our ongoing expenses with debt. And President Trump bears his share as well. I mean, the deficit, he set a record for the most debt added in a single four-year presidential term before this. So we're sort of getting past that that blame and looking at each other and figuring out how do we get this country on a sustainable fiscal path.
The House will be in order.
The fact that we're going to be spending in 4 years more money on interest than defense. We already spend more money on interest than our children.
Listen, I've been covering Washington for a long time. There hasn't been a real hunger for dealing with the debt. Both parties, to your point, Congressman Peters, have been spending a ton. Now, we dealt with the pandemic, and both administrations dealt with that. But the last time the national debt, ever decreased was 1957. Most times, cuts in Washington deal with slowing increases. Congressman Huizenga. So, I mean, there's got to be a different mindset up there completely.
Unfortunately, we have some folks that don't see it as a problem. They think as long as we can keep ahead and keep up on those interest payments, it doesn't really matter what we spend. And to me, that's just wrong-headed. I'm a small business person, 3 generations. My family's been involved in construction here in Michigan. I'm no captain of industry, but I know how to read a P&L sheet. And it's math, Brett. At the end of the day, this is simply math, and the math isn't adding up.
Bipartisan Fiscal Forum, and I applaud you for trying to find common ground. But Congress has been at this for a long time. There's structures and committees, but you have to create something else to try to get around what has been years and years of spending. I'm wondering, we went through Simpson Bowles, Congressman Peters. That was an idea that everybody could get their head around, but it never got across the finish line. Do you guys see some big thing that's going to change the dynamic?
The big thing is the debt is way bigger, and both parties have been complicit in not really paying attention to the long-term effect of borrowing to pay our ongoing expenses.
I think not only is it elected officials and the structure that surrounds our government operations that need to realize this, but citizens. Citizens have to understand what this means, and they have to have their be heard, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level. They've got to make sure that those of us that do end up on the ballot have an understanding that they aren't happy with the situation. That will also motivate some folks.
All right, so both of you, really quickly to wrap up, when you hear somebody say it's just all partisanship up on Capitol Hill and you can't really get anything done, What do you say, Congressman Peters and Congressman Huizenga?
Well, Bill and I actually, I think we see that we're problem solvers. You can't solve any big problem in Congress without Democrats and Republicans. You basically need 60 votes in the Senate for anything. You got two people here leading a group of a significant group to really deal with this problem in a bipartisan way. That's the way it should be done. And I don't think it will be easy, but I think it's the only way.
Well said. And at the end of the day, we have to have people who have the courage of their convictions to speak the truth and explain what's going on, no matter what they might be from constituents. We've got to be realistic, and we've got to be honest with them about our future. And the sad reality is we're in trouble.
Well, we are in trouble in the big picture on this finance front, but there are a lot of things happening on the positive side, common ground-wise, and we like to focus on that. We appreciate you both coming on to talk to us.